Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Sharon Rafos, Sandy's middle daughter. On behalf of my sisters, Kim and Robin, I would like to welcome you to this very special celebration of life for our mother, Sandra. It is such an honor to her to have you join us here today. And seeing as how Mom was a dual citizen, we're celebrating in two countries, which, as you know, she would absolutely be thrilled to have two celebrations, as she absolutely loved a good gathering. In January, the ever-growing Rafos family gathered for a send-off weekend in the U.S. in northern Michigan on the shore of Lake Superior at the site where we released our dad's ashes. We had a lovely weekend of remembering Mom with all of her favorite foods, beverages, games, stories, crafts, singing, and dancing. When Mom died in November, my sisters and I all knew that we also wanted to bring her home here to Toronto and her multiple communities. Her community of faith and spirit at Neighborhood Congregation, her many women's circle friends, her grandmother's circle, her life friends of ICA, Northwater, and her neighbors of Glen Davis Crescent. And we thought it only fitting to send her off from this Rafos Hall, this beautiful sanctuary, very special place that we had yet had a chance to visit. As many of you know, because of Mom's illness, we had to relocate her 6 years ago. We had her into Michigan where she could be closer to the family. So in our initial reach out to plan this event, we were uncertain of the reception we would receive. After all, it had been 6 long years. What we have encountered has been an overwhelming warm welcome, full enthusiasm, and generous support. We have been so touched by the outpouring. Mom clearly left an impression. All of you here and all of you at home have been touched by her life. So thank you for joining us today to honor our mother and your friend, Sandra Lynn Rafos.
We are living neath the great Big Dipper. We are washed by the very same rain. We are swimming in the rain together, some in power and some in pain. We can worship this ground we walk on, cherishing the beings that we live beside. Loving spirits will live forever. We're all swimming to the other side. I am alone and I am searching, hungering for answers in my time. I am balanced at the brink of wisdom. I'm impatient to receive a sign. I move forward with my senses open. Imperfection, it be my crime. In humility, I will listen. We're all swimming to the other side.
We are living neath the great Big Dipper. We are washed by the very same rain. We are swimming in the stream together, some in power and some in pain. We can worship this ground we walk on, cherishing the beings that we live beside. Loving spirits will live forever. We're all swimming to the other side.
On this journey through thoughts and feelings, finding intuition, my head, my heart, I am gathering the tools together. I'm preparing to do my part. All of those who have come before me, band together and be my guide. Loving lessons that I will follow. We're all swimming to the other side. We are living beneath the great Big Dipper. We are washed by the very same rain. We are swimming in the stream together, some in power and some in pain. We can worship this ground we walk on, cherishing the beings that we live beside. Loving spirits will live forever. We're all swimming to the other side. When we get there, we'll discover all of the gifts we were given to share have been with us since life's beginning, and we never noticed they were there. We can balance on the brink of wisdom, never recognizing that we've arrived. Loving spirits will live together. We're all swimming to the other side. We are living beneath the great Big Dipper. We are washed by the very same rain. We are swimming in the stream together, some in power and some in pain. We can worship this ground we walk on, cherishing the beings that we live beside. Loving spirits will live forever. We're all swimming to the other side. Loving spirits will live together. We're all swimming to the other side.
We light this candle to honor the life of Sandra Lynn Rafos, known to many as Sandy. We come into this sanctuary of loss. We come into this sanctuary of compassion. We come into this sanctuary of love. I acknowledge that we stand on land which has been the home to the Wendat, Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit. These First Nations lived here before us and are living here now, together with other First Nations, Métis and Inuit. I offer gratitude to these First Peoples for the gifts they have offered, gifts that have not always been respected. May we honor our treaties and Indigenous teachings about our Mother Earth and all our relations. My name is Pat Trudeau. I serve as contract minister here at Neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Congregation, where I first met Bob and Sandy in 2010. Just a reminder as we begin to this is sacred space, and I ask you to turn off your cell phones and request that there be no recording or photos during the ceremony. May we find solace and hope as we share our grief for the loss of Sandra, even as we celebrate her life. During the ceremony, there will be tributes by several people. We have come to share the loss we have felt in Sandra's passing and some examples of the joy we carry forth from her life. The ceremony will be followed by a reception here in the Cappuccino Room. Behind me, there is a beautiful memorabilia table that you are encouraged to visit and peruse, and everything is touchable. Some of Sandy's creations are there. Much thanks to those who contributed words, music, and their time to make this service personal and meaningful.
Lord, make me the instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me bring love. Where there is offense, let me bring pardon. Where there is discord, let me bring union. Where there is error, let me bring truth. Where there is doubt, let me bring faith. Where there is despair, let me bring hope. Where there is darkness, let me bring your light. Where there is sadness, let me bring joy. O Master, let me not seek as much to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in the giving that one receives, it is in the self-forgetting that one finds, it is in the pardoning that one is pardoned, and it is in the dying that one is raised to eternal life.
This is the grandmother honoring song for grandmother Sandy, Dancing Fire. If you can imagine a bonfire under a starry night and all the light and magic that she brought to each of our hearts.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Robin, Sandy's youngest daughter. Choosing what to say today in this tribute was a process. I started thinking about what I would say when this day came about a year ago. I had conversations with people that she worked with and friends over the years, and I asked them how they remembered her. And those conversations gave me new admiration for things that I had not known about Mom or had the opportunity to experience with her. I will never know all the ripple effects that she generated, but I do believe it to be expansive. So instead of recounting Mom's life's journey, I will share a few of my favorite qualities and fondest memories. One of my favorite qualities was Mom's creativity. It could be seen in the way she thought outside the box, how she visualized space, and how she manipulated raw materials into these creative expressions. She continually explored different art forms, some of which I was able to experience with her: basket making, quilting, doll making, and one of her last expressions, soul collage. Trying a new art form would often open the door to acquire materials, which could also be an adventure in itself. A memorable shopping trip was going to a wool festival in Michigan. I thought we were going to look at yarn and knitting supplies, but instead we found live sheep, brushes, shears, and bundles of raw wool. We left with this basket full of different varieties of sheep wool, and then we had to figure out what to do next. We learned how to strip the oils off with dish soap, and then we dyed the wool with Kool-Aid powder, and we got these really fun, vibrant colors. We could never come up with a solution, though, that dealt with the strong odor of the sheep. I hope some of you here today had the opportunity to create something with Mom. I believe that she used art forms to bring people together into an intimate space. I don't feel that she was ever looking for the end result, the item that was being made, but instead she was chasing the creative process. It is in the process where the confines of time and space slip away and you can just be. That is where the magic happens. There was deep listening, free conversation, lots of laughter, no judgment, and unbridled creativity. This was my favorite place to be with Mom. Another quality that I admired was her sense of adventure and bravery. Sandy traveled the world, tested her limits, and sought answers within herself. Many stories she shared from her childhood included episodes of adventure. A favorite of hers to tell was when she got an army hammock and she hung it in the woods behind her house, and she would sleep overnight in a tree with her pet chickens roosting in the branches above her. A shared time of adventure with Mom was when I was 12 years old and we lived in Hong Kong. Together we explored crowded marketplaces and shops filled with mysterious things. We rode double-decker buses and ferries to unknown destinations, and we'd come home with these packages eloquently wrapped in paper and then tied with twine, and they contained our delights from our outings. A memorable shopping trip that year occurred when we were shopping in the marketplace for groceries. We stopped at our usual shop for eggs, and Mom spotted a cat in the corner with this litter of kittens. Mom managed to persuade the shopkeeper to include a kitten in the transaction. And my heart soared as I carried my new friend home in a little brown paper bag. While in Hong Kong, Mom worked for the Shanghai Bank. Her department went on an outward-bound adventure for a week to promote team building. And I remember her coming home from that experience exhausted but exhilarated. It was a physical and it was a psychological adventure. She described climbing a rock face suspended by a rope, just gripped by fear, her legs shaking uncontrollably.
but with the cheers of her team, she made it to the top of the cliff. The next day, she was left on a small, uninhabited island for 2 days by herself, with minimal food, water, and a tarp. She discovered she was not alone. She was joined by a goat that lived on the island, and they had to figure out how they were going to get along. Maybe the goat was an added obstacle by the Outward Bound team, but she found the solution and completed the challenge. At 12 years old, Mom became my rock star. I saw her strength and her bravery. She was doing things and going places that I would never imagine doing myself. She continued to wow me over the years with her remote travels and openness to her spiritual and personal discovery. She went on a vision quest in the Arizona desert. She hiked the Andes Mountains with a spirit guide. She joined communities such as the congregation here at Neighborhood and her grandmother's circles, and more, all aligned in the pursuit of a deeper understanding within herself and the world around her. At 86 years old, Mom is still my rock star. When we met with Reverend Pat to talk about the plan for this memorial, she asked if there was a favorite saying of Mom's, and at the time, nothing came to me. That evening, I asked my husband and daughter if they could think of any, and immediately Emma said yes. She reminded me of whenever we visited Mom over the past few years, there was an exchange in saying goodbye. We would hug and kiss her, and we would say, "It's really good to see you." And she would always respond with, "It's good to be seen." So, Mom, we are all gathered here today to remember you. We see you.
Thank you. These last few weeks, preparing for today's celebration, has been a very sweet kaleidoscope of memories. After sorting through boxes and pictures and albums, I remembered that I had old letters and began to read through Ziploc bags full of old aerograms and onion skin pages from as much as 50 years ago. What a tremendous gift. So not only was I immersed in pictures, but I was also immersed in Mom's voice as words from her letters recounted stories, gave encouragement, and shared wisdom. I learned more about her grit, courage, and generous heart. From early on, Mom chose a non-traditional path of service. In the late 1960s, when the civil rights movement was underway, she wasn't one to sit at home and watch about it on TV. They joined in protest marches, helped with outreach programs, and did what they could to support the cause for equal rights. That calling for change led them to the Institute of Cultural Affairs, a group that was working on a global scale to help underserved populations and communities. For 2.5 decades, they committed to working with ICA, helping to develop and lead programs designed to challenge social boundaries and help resolve local problems. In that span of years, she and Dad lived and worked in Kenya, Nigeria, Tokyo, Hong Kong, New York, Cleveland, Chicago, and Toronto. In a letter from Kenya, she writes, We've spent 4 days in the village meeting with all of the women. We've helped to set up a mobile clinic that will travel in a circuit on a weekly basis. We found seeds for the new gardens, uniforms for the youth sport club, space for preschool, and cement for wells for clean drinking water. I really enjoy the team of Kenyan women I work with. They're all about your age, and they call me Mama. Once we leave Nairobi, they quit speaking English. We laugh a lot because I don't always know what's going on. At night, we sleep on the floor in mud huts, and for meals, we eat ugali, the local corn maize staple, with our fingers. Through mud and dirt, the women walk miles to get water. Until the freshwater well is built, they collect rainwater from their roofs. It's hard work being here, but it's also lots of fun. I think you'd like it here. I read letter after letter much like this, spanning my teens and 20s, full of stories and long-forgotten paragraphs of encouragement. She writes, "You said you've been thinking of a vocation and what that might be. I think I'd have to say that my vocation is being a demonstration of care wherever I show up. The hard part is finding the best way to act out that care when there is so much need in our world." She was indeed that person who lived out her care. She worked hard to make things better for others. For my sisters and I, she modeled how to work well with others, to listen with compassion, to be creative in our own problem solving, and to see possibility in all things. Mom never saw that she couldn't do something. She tackled problems with creativity, determination, and a wonderful sense of humor. And above all, she lived in a way that gave me permission as a young woman to confidently evolve into who I wanted to be. She was one of a kind. So, Mom, I want to say thank you. Thank you for your amazing life, your creativity, imagination, commitment to your life's hard work of pursuing generous causes, and your enduring love for Dad, family, and friends has been exemplary of a full and beautifully lived life. I celebrate you and your unique and marvelous and colorful life.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Miriam Patterson, and I'm a friend of Sandy's, maybe also perhaps an adopted daughter. Feels nice to be speaking after the other three. And I feel very blessed to be included in today's service. Like many of you in the audience, I knew Sandy through my connection with the ICA, but I didn't really get to know Sandy until about 16 years ago when I was expecting my daughter, Nasinya. And over the years, much like a grandmother, Sandy took a lot of interest in Nasinya's life and my own life. So I'd like to share just with you a few of the memories that I have that I've been carrying with me since she left 6 years ago. First of all, Sandy was, as we've heard and we see, very, very crafty. I guess on multiple layers, she was crafty, wasn't she? anyway, she was very thoughtful, and when I was expecting my daughter, she wrote me a really beautiful card, and she also made a quilt for my daughter Nasinya. And this quilt, because my daughter's dad is Kenyan, I think she felt very connected to the Kenyanness, having lived there. So a grandmother in another way, so to speak, as well. She made this beautiful quilt that had the map of Africa on it, and all the colors of the landscape, like if you were to go on safari in Kenya. So this beautiful quilt that we still have and we cherish, and it was just so thoughtful, especially since at that point in time we didn't have that much of a connection. She really just like reached out and connected. So because of this connection I think that she had with Nasinya, and then therefore with me, we ended up having lots and lots of dinners and time together. So over the next maybe 12 or 13 years, we would connect every couple of months. We would have a meal together. Sandy loved, I think, going out to eat. We had Indian food, Japanese food, Korean food, Thai food, I mean, anything. We had a lot of different kinds of food. And towards the later part of our time together, she really loved Japanese food, and especially sushi pizza. Do you remember sushi pizza, anybody? Yeah? And another way that I got to know Sandy, I guess, over the years was through the time we spent together working on a project. If you know Sandy, you probably heard that she worked in Chicago, right, in the late 60s as a preschool teacher. And because of that, not because of that, but I guess as part of that, as she lived her life, she was really quite passionate about early childhood education. And there was a project called the Learning Basket that she and Bob were really supportive of. The Learning Basket turned into another project here in Canada. As main supporters, they wanted to make sure that early childhood education was not only being supported in places across the world, but they also wanted to think about how in North America could we also do early childhood education? What would it mean to do culturally appropriate care for people here in North America? And so through that, we started to work together, and she got very excited about working with First Nations and Indigenous communities here in North America to figure out, well, what would that look like? And what it ended up looking like was creating projects that would support language, Indigenous language, and so that's what we did. And part of that passion, Sandy ended up traveling to Thunder Bay and traveling down into New Mexico. And I reached out to a few of her friends just yesterday, and I said, you know, there's this memorial that's happening for Sandy. And they said, oh, we had so much fun in New Mexico. Sandy just was like looking for the perfect turquoise stone, and she going in and out of stores, and also just full of humor. And even though I wasn't on that trip, I wanted to share that there were people who are remembering her, especially her joy and her laughter. And finally, one of the other many memories that I have to do with the visits that I made to the Rafos household. In the last few years of Bob's life, I was their yoga instructor, both of them. Bob would come to group yoga sessions, and Sandy, I would have to make special trips twice a week into their home to do yoga, and I don't really think she was into the yoga very much, but she was into having my daughter Nasinya come. So I would always bring Nasinya, or quite often I would bring Nasinya, who was at this time, 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, and Sandy would set up this whole area in the room for Nasinya, like colored pencils and papers and all kinds of fun things to play with. And then we would come in, and Sandy would have fun with my daughter, and then I would secretly sneak in some yoga sessions, which she would do very begrudgingly after a lot of humping and hooing, and then we would get back to playing with Nasinya, and then I would leave, and it would have been a perfect time. So I have so many memories like that. I really missed her when she left, and I think the combination of Bob passing and Sandy leaving all at the same time left a dramatic hole. Like, I really felt I was spending a lot of time going to that household, and all of a sudden wasn't anymore. So I feel really, really honored and blessed to name that here today with you, and to be able to tell Sandy that I really missed her, and I do miss her. So thank you so much, Sandy. You were very thoughtful, so engaged, very sometimes fiery, creative, real, living your life in such a beautiful way that I would only like to emulate as I grow older. So thank you.
Gordon, could you pull up the slides, please, for Amazing Grace? You are all welcome to join us in singing Amazing Grace. Maybe it's easier to stand to sing. I see the sisters in the front row would like to stand. Yes. For Sandy and for all of us.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've now less days to
I feel like it's not there. It goes. Okay. Sandy was my friend. I was going to say I can't remember what year Sandy and Bob began attending our neighborhood congregation, but apparently it was 2010, Pat? But as soon as they came, they jumped right in. They got involved, and we benefited by their knowledge and their love. I first became aware of Sandy's fiber artwork and her love of quilting when she donated one of her art pieces to the silent auction. I also love fiber art and art quilting. I sought her out, and together we attended quilt shows and quilt guilds. I enjoyed her company, and I think she enjoyed mine. Conversation was easy. After I sold my business, I had more free time, and I'm not sure whose idea it was, probably Sandy's. And we started a small group of women who got together to knit, crochet, stitch, whatever, and make jewelry. I have always found that being in the company of other women is a happy place for me. This stitching group became a safe space for us, a place to lift each other up and to learn about one another. And it was in this little group that we got to know Sandy best. It was Sandy who named our group Stitch and Enrich. No stitch and bitch for Sandy. Connection is what we were looking for, and it's what we got. Sometimes we did very little making, but we did do a lot of talking about everything. And I believe these conversations did indeed enrich our lives. Sandy had the best stories, but she was also a good listener. She and Bob worked for years with a nonprofit in many parts of the world, sometimes and often poor places. She loved to talk about her work and about the things she had seen and done and the people she met and interacted with. We all talked about our children. Sandy had many opinions, but she was never someone who would out you. She was interested in what you thought, and she considered new ways of seeing. If she disagreed with you, she let you know, always kindly and open for a discussion. I have met few women like her of her age. She was always open to learning and to new ideas, but she also had no problem telling you how she felt and what she thought. I once took a photograph of Sandy dancing with Bob at one of our fundraising events. I think you might have one. I think I saw one briefly here. She was smiling, as she often was, and I saw love there. I wanted to print that photograph for them and give it to them as a gift, but the lighting was bad and the picture was blurry. I find now, when I think of Sandy, I see her dancing with Bob and filled with love. Her love lives on in her family. It lives in this community and with her many friends. It lives in the countries where she worked and in the many people she touched there. Sandy, I miss you. We miss you. I hope you and Bob are still dancing. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mariam Gibson, and I am representing a group of women, 8 of them, that Sandy was belonged to, and we met once a month. And things that were already spoken, what Sandy was interested in, were done in that group. Few of the things that I want to mention, Sandy was always ready to have fun. Some of the times that she would say, "Are we having wine?" when we get together. Needless to say, we never had wine. We just have ginger tea every time. And but after that, Sandy will mention it quite a few times, whether we were having wine. Sandy had brought so much of her experience to us. Sandy was a spiritual person. So with all her experience around the world and with the age that she was at when she was with us, it was important to her that what she learned and the experience that she was having, that they got shared and they got used in our daily lives. And one of the ways she did that was she shared her love for birds. We would go to her place in her backyard. There was always bird feeder, and she would have so much knowledge about different birds, and she would try to educate us with that. She had figured it out how to make a quiche with yogurt, and that became like a big deal. She would bring this quiche to our meetings. The other part that she was so interested in indigenous knowledge. So she studied for quite a few years. As you all know, we have already talked about that. But she brought drumming to us. She explained that we made drums one time. She brought she introduced us to the medicine wheel, the 4 directions. We used to do a different way of the 4 direction in our group, and she gave us a different perspective from the indigenous way that she had learned to share with our group, and we all benefited from that. One time she gave us she would always have something in her pocket to share that we would make. Felting was one of the projects that we did with her. We would go to her house at Christmas time, and she would have the place absolutely so well planned and decorated, and she loved she had these things that she had picked up from the museums or from her travels, and that she would want us to show us where she'd been and give us a history of how they were made and where they were made and where they were from. But most of all, we were also privileged to hear she would have update of all her kids and her grandkids, what they were doing, and she would have highlights of them. One of the grandson who was working on community schools in Chicago, and she was so proud of this and feature that the grandson has gotten into, and on. And we would get this regular report every time we met. Even none of the kids were in the country, but we knew exactly what was happening with them every month. So, and the other time, one time, she brought us, it's also comes from indigenous understanding. About 5 years ago, 2008, one time she brought us these 12 eggs, and they were called spiritual eggs. And what they were, she gave it to us, and it was, you use them one every month to create something new and let go of the past and give something, a birth to the new beginning and new start. So I like to, since it's a spring, And it was just this time of the year that she had given those eggs to us. I like to remember her for that, to let us give our past, accept our past, and start the new beginning. And what can we birth that's new, and create that's new from her life's experience and her life's journey, and the knowledge that she shared with us in our group and elsewhere. So think about 12 spiritual eggs next 12 months, and think about Sandy every time you try to let go of something that needs to let go and something that needs to be created new. Our group miss her terribly. We miss her creativity. We miss her present. We just miss her physic body, that she was also very strong, and you can just tell with those colors, you can't miss it. So we miss all that, and we miss her energy. And so thank you for sharing your mom with us.
Hello, my name is Elise Packard, and I speak today in tribute to Sandra through the prism of being a woman, a wife, a mother, and one who has been called by the Spirit to respond to innocent human suffering. I, like many of you, look to Sandra as a role model in our shared international work. I think the metaphors of a cradle board and a quilt best describe my closest shared experience with her. Sandra cared deeply for her 3 daughters, and her mother energy extended to children who live off the grid of privilege. This care fueled Sandra's desire to engage in our work with babies, their caregivers, and their families. The task was well defined, much like the structure of a cradle board. We understood that we had an approach to family literacy that might protect a baby from harm and enrich their life experience. But in order to deliver this program, we needed to travel long hours across the New Mexico high desert to meet with Head Start teachers in 2 pueblos and the Navajo Nation, all the time supporting their work of recovering their languages and their cultures. Our time with our hosts included sitting for hours in talking circles as teachers, parents, and grandparents shared their grief over losing their home cultures and their languages. Although well defined, this work required disciplined creativity, much like designing and stitching an intricate quilt. We needed to be present, to listen, and to be humbled in the awareness that our ancestors, in their hubris, had robbed our gracious hosts of their cultural core. We needed to discern how we as outsiders might be helpful. Knowing that it is easy to fall into comfortable patterns of dominance, we needed to ask questions and listen carefully to invent a way to support these teachers in their resolve to recover that which is precious and had been replaced. As people with a shared concern, we were quilting a fabric of care together, but most importantly, we were inventing how to be with one another. To do this work meant travel over rough terrain, leaving half of our hearts back home. We needed to be independent while working as a team. We had to be bold, but gentle, appreciative, compassionate, intentional as we encountered situations that were strange and often heartbreaking. When the tension of this push and pull seemed to be too much, I could look to Sandra as a role model. Graceful, poised, quiet, and attentive, spreading warmth with her winsome smile. ready to laugh, and unafraid to cry, generously relating stories of being a mother and a wife while inventing her way of being a woman. She easily bridged language barriers and cultures and related to strangers out of love. In this work, Sandra was authentic and kind, and her style made a world of difference in relating to our generous hosts. Thank you, Sandra, for investing your spirit and your energy in this work, for stepping into the cradle board and stitching of a quilt of care for Native children and their families, and most of all, for being fearless, gentle, and wise. You helped me feel confident while walking into the unknown. In tribute, I share with you and with all of you this poem. Sandra Rafos, Winsome Woman of Steel. Bob always called her Sandra. Many of us knew her as Sandy. Her winsome smile expressed her kindness. Her twinkling eyes conveyed her love of life and family and those surrounding her. She was a professional woman before her time, a devoted wife and mother, willing to fill in gaps, to do what was helpful, to be a dependable team member. Sandy sparked vision for a more compassionate world. She was no pushover, and when tested, she stood her ground, unbending like steel. Who knew that such artistry resided in her fingertips, and that a native spirit resided in her soul? She dared to give that spirit expression, sharing with others the drumbeat of nature, the artistry of quilting, the audacity to weave community in a time broken by the stress of transition. Sandy and Bob, thank you for leaving a legacy of 3 compassionate and serving daughters who carry on your family's gift of integrity. Thank you for weaving a family nest that has cradled confident grandchildren who express your spark in life and in service. Your gift is complete, as are your lives.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
Although they're listed in the program, I want to lift up some names. I want to lift up Suzanne Mazares is our music director, and Alison Kabayama who sang the last song, who's been singing singing today, is our chair of music and the president of our board of directors, and I want to lift up Joan Walder spoke as a friend. My name is Pat, and I knew Sandy and Bob as fellow congregants and congregational leaders before I entered ministry. And I always got lots of encouragement from them to go into seminary. Much of my connection with Sandy over a number of years was through a shared love of arts and this community and the colors purple, green, turquoise, all the shades of blue and green. We would look at each other across the room and wave, acknowledge each other's colors. Thank you for being here today to honor Sandy's memory and share condolences with friends and her beloved daughters, Robin, Sharon, and Kim, and their spouses. I got to know Sandy over the years through serving on the board, Sunday services, various committees, dinners, and a shared interest in football and civil rights. It has been years since I saw her last, but the fondness remains. When we lose somebody after a long time apart, it takes time to remember the details. I was trying to remember. I will admit that I have a better sense of how I felt about her and how I felt around her than the words we exchanged. It was so long ago. We don't always remember what was said, but we tend to remember how we felt around that person, how we felt when she spoke, when she was near. I felt energized and appreciated in her presence. I felt that she appreciated me. Her spark ignited my imagination. I remember a dinner for prospective new members at our home, the home of Wilburn Hayden and myself, on February 27th, 2011. In attendance were Sandy and Bob Rafos, who had been attending Neighborhood for a few months, and they already seemed like longtime members. At that dinner, there were several new people. Some joined, some drifted away, but Sandy and Bob became members and mainstays at Neighborhood. They joined on April 24th, 2011, Easter Sunday, and remained members until 2018, when Bob died and Sandy returned to the USA with her daughters due to declining health. I celebrate those years in which we benefited from her fellowship and vibrancy, and also her sense of fun and adventure. Today, we have gotten several glimpses of this beautiful, beautiful woman from several perspectives. Your tributes help us to feel her presence once more. Looking at photos and creations of her hands, talking with others helps us to feel her presence once more. I remember her leadership, which I witnessed at a Board Day Away retreat. Sandy guided us through a model that she had used at ICA. She offered the session with confidence and humor. I remember her as community-minded. She joined the board and various committees. She participated fully as long as she could. I remember her as an artist with a fine eye for shades of color, particularly the watercolors of blue and green. She was determined. At one point, she and I formed the Altar Beautification Committee, and Sandy would not rest until the front of the sanctuary was decluttered and the space looked beautiful. I remember her as persistent. When she found something rewarding, she wanted everybody to share it. When she began doing soul collage with her dear friend Maggie, she wanted others to share the experience and take classes. She urged me to get involved and kept at me about how much I would love it and it would change my life. I politely declined, saying that I was busy at seminary, but she persisted and persisted. One Sunday, I recall, back at Hiawatha, I simply backed up toward the cloakroom, and she followed me all the way to the coat racks, insisting that I give it a try, and I just gave up. I did take the classes, and she was right. I loved it. When I think of Sandy, I recall being grateful that she was a few years older than me. My mother's generation of women born circa 1920 were stalwart and dutiful, but not always emotionally available or open. Like many women, I longed for role models. Sandy was part of the in-between generation born in the mid-30s to late 40s, who rode the first wave of the Cultural Revolution of the 60s and the early 70s. They were feminists before the concept became universalized. Many UU women, now in their late 80s and 90s, have acted as guides and mentors for the women of my generation. Sandy was such a woman. She was a positive, women positive, and she was supportive of other women. It showed in her work and in her relationships with other women. She did not see younger women as rivals. Rather, she treated them as allies. She was encouraging. I recall looking across the circle once during a women's group, and there was a particularly tender moment, and she gave me a look and a nod that said, "I see you, Pat Trudeau." I see you, and I see all the women here. Her life story fascinated me. Each time we got together socially, I asked, I listened, and I learned more. She and Bob joined our family for Christmas in 2015. I had an opportunity to learn more about her adventures with ICA. Sandy had an incredible network, and I watched my teenage son, listening to her. As we were saying goodbye to Bob in late 2017, early 2018, we were also saying goodbye to Sandy, who became more housebound and eventually went to Michigan, where she could be cared for and be closer to family. We missed her. I miss her. I am grateful to have known her. While it has been sad to lose Sandy, it has been a pleasure getting to know Sharon, Kim, and Robin, all strong women with loving hearts, much like their mother. They carry her spirit and wisdom.
Good afternoon. My name is Allison Kabayama, and I am a founding member and current president of the board of directors here at Neighborhood. I've been asked to share some of the memories and sentiments on behalf of 7 of Sandy's close women friends here at Neighborhood. Margot Young says, when Sandy and Bob joined Neighborhood, they immediately got very involved in the community, so I never thought of them as new members. Sandy had such a sweet smile, a warmth and friendliness, and readily included everyone in the circle of friends that surrounded her after service. I admired her creativity and was fortunate enough to win at a silent auction a small art piece she created. I also admired the years of international work she and Bob did in earlier years. Sandy, as well as Bob, made a huge contribution to Neighborhood through work on committees, board roles, and by supporting the community in many ways. They were a good friend to many, including me. I appreciated their friendship and also their offer of a ride to service during snowstorms or bad weather. I missed Sandy when she moved to be closer to family after Bob passed. She, along with Bob, left a big hole in the fabric of our community. However, it was comforting to know she was near her loving family. Having this service today is a wonderful opportunity to have dear Sandy in our thoughts and presence once more. I believe Margot is joining us online, as is Gail Raynard, who says, I would pick up Sandy on my way to the weekly yoga classes offered by Phyllis Danu. One time I spoke about the Institute of Shamanic Studies, and I learned that Sandy had been one of the first early pioneering instructors at the Institute. We talked about specific practices on healthy sexual attitudes, on sexual being and manifesting and honoring your sexuality. This was a deep and profound connection that we shared. I also treasure a small quilting piece that Sandy made. Her artwork is tiny and intricate and shown here. Luann Ship says, I first met Sandy at Neighborhood on Hiawatha. I remember her and Bob being very welcoming to me. We were in a women's group together that would meet once a month in the evening, and the conversations were always enlightening and fun. Another group we were in was called Stitch and Enrich, and we would go to each other's homes and do some sort of craft. The members consisted of myself, Sandy, Joan, Brenda Linneman, Phyllis, and Gail. I loved it when we went to Sandy's because she had kitties and interesting books and knickknacks. She always had tea and some kind of snack for us, and we would sit around the dining room table and quilt and knit and bead and share stories and laugh and laugh and laugh. She was so warm and loving. I'll always remember her and her blue outfits. Loris Thomas told me, I feel so honored to have known Sandy as a fellow member of Neighborhood. She reminded me of my own mother, who, like Sandy, loved to wear bright colors, had a zest for life, and cared deeply for the welfare of humanity. Sandy and Bob always participated in every community event at Neighborhood. They were the life of the party and the heart and soul of our congregation. I am so grateful we now have Rafos Hall to remember and honor their huge contribution to the life of Neighborhood. Margaret Hazelwood says, remembering Sandy. Sandy and I co-chaired the Neighborhood Women's Group for a number of years. Sandy was a champion of women and women's groups. Her experience in multiple women's groups around the world meant she had a bottomless well of wonderful stories to tell and wisdom to share with us. She also brought her warmth and delicious potluck treats. Rites of passage ceremonies were one of her favorites, and on her initiative, our group hosted a wonderfully unique pre-wedding ceremony celebration for a member of our staff. Sandy will always live on in our hearts. What a special lady. Phyllis Danu says, my warmest memories of Sandy are from the Stitch and Enrich days, when we gathered at each other's homes for tea and crafts. We savored the stories and events of our lives together. Sandy was also a regular for a time at my Journey to Awakening class. I loved her mischievous sense of humor. And lastly, I share words from Faith Walker, who says, back in 2018, I attended a neighborhood fundraiser, the annual silent auction usually held in November. I was very taken by a beautifully crafted and woven poncho with intricate strands of silver, teal, and black threads. Even more special, I discovered that it and a number of other items had been donated by Sandy Rafos before she moved back to the US to be near her daughters. It turned out to be a hot item. I am not one to usually get attached to having to have something, but knowing that it belonged to Sandy, and such it was a beautiful piece, I really wanted to claim it for myself at the end of the night. Checking and rechecking through the night and making a last-minute increase to the bid sheet moments before the auction closed, it became mine. It is one of my beloved possessions to this day. It makes me think of Sandy whenever I wear it. She was such a classy woman with a deep, vibrant laugh, always a little larger than life, and so often wearing aquatic shades. Sandy was decent, graceful, and generous in spirit. We were so lucky to have both Sandy and Bob as part of our neighborhood family. I wish Sharon, Kim, and Robin peace and comfort, knowing that Sandy had a life well lived and, more importantly, loved.
You've all been very patient and very still through the ceremony, and your presence is so appreciated. We extinguish the chalice. We cannot extinguish the love. As we extinguish this chalice, let us acknowledge that we will not, that we cannot extinguish the love or the memory of her or the love we carry forward. These are the words of Greg Ward. And Robin, if you would.
Well, thank you. This has been wonderful. We want to thank everyone that came here today to celebrate Mom's life. This experience has been a gift to our family. We wanted to recognize her life in a real meaningful way with her community and her peers. I think we did that today. I think we did. Special thanks to the neighborhood congregation and their participation in putting together this event with us. Allison and Suzanne, your tapestry of music was perfect. And Gordon, your direction of the technology element, which allowed all of our friends and other people to join us from all around the country that could not be here today. Thank you. And finally, for Reverend Pat, who guided us through in planning with today with deep compassion and respect and love for us and our mother. We thank you. So we would like to continue to celebrate and remember Mom, and we invite everybody to join us in the Cappuccino Room for a reception. But also, I wanted to point out that on the table, there are several feathers, and they're quilted, and they've been made out of Mom's fabric. And the family have put these together, and we invite everybody to choose one and take that home with you. And hopefully it will remind you of our Mom and what she means to you. So thank you today for everything. Or thank you, everybody, for today.
Hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us. So lift me up to the light of change. I am open and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us. So lift me up to the light of change. I am open and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us. So lift me up to the light of change. So lift me up to the light of change.
Thank you. Our ceremony has ended. Thank you. Please stay for refreshments and conversation.